Hey guys, welcome back to some more AFK Arena. Today we're over on the YouTube account and we're looking at our January tier list. Now overall guys, when you look at the heroes that we have gotten most recently, Lady Simona being one, we're starting to see her make a little bit of headway in formations in a couple different game modes. In addition, we got the double release guys, so we did get Gavis, which we're building out quite a bit here, and we also did pick up Eugene. Now for a majority of players guys, you should have Eugene at Mythic at this point from the current events, from what we have going on. You should definitely have the copies of him. And we also picked up Vika. Now, Vika, unfortunately, is not finding a place as of today. Could not be or might not be the case in the future, but as of right now, we are not seeing her really very predominant in the tier list at all. So let's hop over, we'll break down this tier list. All right, guys, and here we are for our January tier list. I love doing these guys every single month. SSS, so the top tier heroes that are really the driving force in AFK Arena almost remain the same. A couple kind of ups and downs in here, which is really cool to see. So starting off, of course, guys, with Liberta. Now, Liberta, again, is one hero very similar to the Awakened version of Athalia. That is utilized in almost every single game mode we have within AFK Arena. So it's kind of crazy to see that still such a very, very strong hero. Damage dealer priority within a lot of different formations. And then also as a damage dealer within the Nightmare Corridor, the Cursed Realm, also seen in the Treasure Scramble. Again, pretty much everywhere that it is possible to be used, he is being used, which is the same for Damia, guys. We see her as a buffer. We see her as a damage dealer. We see her as the ability to not kill your heroes out, which of course is huge in some boss fights. And she does put out a considerable amount of damage. Again, another hero that is going to be utilized and is used a lot of different times, which is the same exact with Lavatoon, guys. He is probably the most significant buffer that we've seen as of late. I would say short of probably Palmer had a similar impact than what we're seeing of Lavatoon. Lavatoon has just given us the ability to amplify the damage on the formations that we had, and especially some formations that we didn't have a very solid buffer in because you could only put Palmer in one place. But as of now, guys, Lavatoon is used in a ton of different formations, which can be the same ringing true with Ivan, guys. There's a lot of different formations where Ivan is the best in slot hero. Subbing in some of the other heroes are not quite as effective as Ivan. And we've even seen Ivan run with Liberta. We've seen Ivan run with the Awakened version of Athalia. We've seen Ivan run with Rem, with the Awakened version of Belinda. Such a high utility hero that we see. And then, of course, with all these guys, when you stack collections behind them, makes a really big difference. Now, the Awakened version of Athalia, again, still being used in a ton of different content, which is the same with the Awakened version of Belinda. Moving back into the SSS class again, still seeing a lot of predominant gameplay with this hero. I thought she'd phase out a little bit, and the only time we really see her kind of phase out a little bit because she does damage so fast is some of the Treasure Scramble teams where she might not be as predominant right now, depending on what iteration of the buff that we are receiving. Now, Rem is still making a very strong presence. Now, the thing with the scoring model that we have for these heroes that they actually utilize is, remember, when it comes to Rem being a dimensional hero, she does not have a tower. That is right, guys. We are still waiting for the Dimensional Tower, which is the same with Rem and both Amelia and Rem. They do not have a tower that they go to, so it kind of sinks because it does kind of downgrade the experience where all of the other heroes are used in every aspect of AFK Arena, including the towers, but without the Dimensional Tower, cannot use her there, unfortunately. Now, the Awakened version of Lyca is still in here, guys. Again, seeing a lot of utility, a lot of dynamic build when it comes to the Awakened version of Lyca, which same can be said for Shamira, guys, still remaining in that SSS class. A very, very strong hero. And again, a lot of formations, guys, that are kind of built around these heroes, which is the reason why it does make them the most predominant heroes that we have within AFK Arena. Now, Palmer, still very unique, guys, with the crit damage amplification is huge. There's not very many heroes that really do what he does. Now, I know we do have the collections now that can change it up a little bit with the crit damage that we can bring, but overall, guys, Palmer is still a huge buffer, which is the same with Lucilla. Again, run in a bunch of different formations, especially when it comes to PvP Treasure Scramble, but we're also seeing her do a considerable amount of damage in the Cursed Realm and the Nightmare Corridor. Then, of course, it is now a driving force within the Hypo Tower, since a lot of players are no longer running Lucretia, so we're starting to see that kind of shift the dynamic a little bit. Now, getting into our SSS heroes, now you'll see a majority of these heroes are used in a bulk of AFK Arena content, or they are in support kind of the SSS heroes. So even looking here, guys, with the Awakened version of Solus, the Awakened version of Sophia, again, they are a staple in every single game mode. When you start getting into multiple teams, they are in those teams. And the big reason why there's a bunch of them actually run in here is you can only put them in once. When you're running, 5 teams, 6 teams, 7 teams, makes a big difference, guys, because you have to outfit all of these heroes, and having both of them in there, the Awakened version of Solus, still doing incredibly well with the combination of Neve, that we still see the formation. And again, still seeing a big driving force with those heroes. Now, Jerome, another one, guys, when you have Jerome built out, he can actually raise stats so incredibly fast. That is the reason why not only Cursed Realm, Nightmare Corridor, also Treasure Scramble, we're seeing a lot of utility is because he can buff, and he can buff super fast with his upgrades when you do have him built out. Now, the crowd control remains with Amelia, not only the crowd control factor, which leads to the energy regeneration, but that also leads to a multitude of factors, and she does an incredible amount of damage as well. When you have her built out, it really just kind of compiles with the damage dealers in there and the energy regeneration that we have. Now, she is very predominant, and I've loved running her as of recently within the campaign formations. Again, working incredibly well with the crowd control aspect with the Awakened version of Belinda, crushing stages very fast. The Naruko is another one, guys, the tiny tank. When you look at a tank and the viability, or really the utility that we have in here, does a considerable amount of damage, has some very strong buffs, has some very strong heals, also has survivability with Nadia, the worm that she actually has. Again, works in a ton of different game modes, and seeing her really in a staple in a lot of the PvP formations, which of course rings true with Alna, guys. The immunity factor that Alna brings, still a very strong hero that a lot of players do run in specific formations. Mortis still bringing the buffs, guys, doesn't require a huge build out, but again, it still does well in a lot of different game modes. Same with the Awakened version of Brutus, guys, not really used as a key driving and a key damage dealer, but still running the Awakened version of Brutus in formations does work incredibly well. Emerson there for the buffs, and of course the crowd control, guys. Still, again, the buffing aspect that we have when we're starting to get into multiple teams still does work incredibly well. Rings true with Scarlet. Scarlet's still doing a lot of damage. And what we're seeing in some game modes, especially, again, Nightmare Corridor, where it is a race to kill the bosses, even running some of the damage dealers or running more than one damage dealer in the formation is working incredibly well. Now, the Awakened version of Baden, starting to see him slide just a little bit. I'm not really seeing the utility in the Nightmare Corridor as much because he doesn't have the buildup as fast, the burst power to really take them down, but still doing incredibly well for being our first season of the Awakened Heroes. Now, Vithiel, damage, healing, and also the buffing aspect. Again, Vithiel makes a really big difference. Same with Orin, guys. Orin, one of the damage dealers that can incredibly burst down bosses, which is the reason why a lot of players still do use Orin in combination. We also see if you don't have the Awakened version of Thane, a lot of players are still running Orin within the combination. Now, of course, Rosaline still holding on strong as the ultimate buffer over and over again. Guys, when you look at the ability to not only put power on other heroes and attack power on other heroes, but the multitude of the ultimate abilities we see is super strong. Now, Ogath, funny enough, guys, when Ogath came out, I actually didn't build him and I wasn't going to build him. As of now, guys, his utility is very high with the burst that he brings to team comps. We're seeing him again run in a lot of formations, not running with a bunch of other hypo heroes, but still super effective in formations, which is the same with Trishia, guys. Trishia is a hero that is now staple in the Cursed Realm and the Nightmare Corridor, and of course the Wilder Tower works incredibly well, does a lot of damage once you have her built out. The durability or the utility with this hero is very high. Silas, we're still seeing again as a buffer, as the immunity, as the healer, working really well. And then, of course, Albedo still remains here, guys, even though Ainz has dropped up, and I'm afraid he's going to get rewound from probably 5 million people that play AFK Arena. Albedo still runs the support, runs with Rem, runs with a bunch of different of our dimensional heroes. So Amelia looking at Rem, looking at Merlin, looking at Joan of Arc. There are so many combinations. And again, the utility wise, guys, Albedo has a ton of utility. Halos still as a buffer and a shielder, holding on tight to the spot. We have Matria in here, again, seeing a little bit less of a dominance when it comes to the treasure scramble. The Hypo team doesn't seem like it's super effective until you get into the multitude of teams, but it's still being run solo in a couple different Cursed Realm formations, which do work incredibly well. Nevi, of course, is still running strong with the Awakened version of Solus, and then Grez is still being used, guys. When you look at the Twisted Realm running Baden and Grez together, currently there's still a lot of utility for the hero, which slowly falling out of the utility, but is still there with the SS. Now looking at our S classes, now these of course are the very solid support heroes or the niche heroes that we see within a lot of formations, where even we have the original version of Taylene, which again, the Nightmare Corridor we just ran was the best in slot damage dealer. Even running without Orthos was still doing incredibly well based on the dynamic and how the hero works. Oden still doing incredibly well. Rain with the buffer. Kinesa and Rook, of course, for that crowd control energy disintegration. And the energy disintegration does incredibly well with the Awakened version of Shemira. Now we have Rowan in here as a buffer, Twins as a buffer. Now, like we were saying earlier, guys, Lady Simona has actually moved from, I believe, the B tier all the way up to the S tier, and we are starting to see her in a lot of comps. We're also seeing her in the Treasure Scramble comps, but we're also seeing her in the Nightmare Corridor and the Cursed Realm comps with the energy regeneration that or that she brings to the teams. Now, we thought originally she would go right to the SSS. That wasn't the case right off the bat, but it seems like she is slowly creeping up with formations, doing incredibly well in there. Now, same with Merlin. Merlin's still holding steady. Joan of Arc, same. And a lot of these also, guys, is if you don't have all of the top tier or access to all of these heroes, a lot of these heroes that are acquired through the Challenger store, that are acquired through the Labyrinth store, still work incredibly well within formations. And I really want to stress that, guys. When you start looking at probably the A and higher, probably maybe even the S and higher, those are kind of the heroes that you want to focus on and that you want to build out. And of course, there are specific builds for those heroes specifically. Now, Mishka, again, still being used as a sub in a lot of formations. Same with Anasta. When it comes to the Awakened version of Thane, the Nightmare Corridor and the Treasure Scramble still doing incredibly well within those game formations. Cursed Realm, unfortunately, not being used any longer. And then, of course, Twisted Realm not being used at all, which Mulan, again, still kind of has a couple niche places that she's being used, but I feel like not quite as much utility, which is the same for Yennefer, guys. Again, as some of the sub-heroes within there, they work incredibly well. Lorzen still being linked for the quick kill ability, especially when you're going through a few different game modes. Zolrath is still up here for the delay with the combination of Leica. Still a very, very lethal combination. Aziz with the energy regeneration. Hodgkin, of course, with the buffs. And then the Invade team that we see every now and then. Scrag still doing incredibly well. Now, getting into our A tier, guys, you can see we also do have Robin Hood in this tier. But a majority of these heroes are heroes that either are very, very, very niche, or they're not really being used at all anymore. Again, Tower, when you think of the Tower, these are probably some of the strongest heroes within the Tower. You can see Lucretia is actually dropping down a little bit. A lot of players are really looking at either doing the Engraving Rewind because they overbuilt or built essentially Lucretia very, very high. And the same with Ainz, guys. If you have the E80, if you have the E100 on these heroes, those are probably going to be the primary ones that we're looking to rewind, because it does make sense based on the materials that you're going to get back to actually build a lot of these other heroes. Now, the rest of these guys, I'm not going to go through all of them. I want to hit up some of the key heroes that we do see in here, again, that might have a very one-off niche formation, or honestly, probably just utility within one single game mode. Even looking through here, guys, PvP, of course, Robin Hood has picked up a little in the treasure scramble. Niche, kind of a couple different places. We still have Leonardo campaign, and campaign works incredibly well, guys. Now, heroes like Guineas, unfortunately, we're not really seeing anymore. We still do have the stall team that works pretty well within the treasure scramble, but I feel like it's not going to be a lot of utility. And then even getting further down here, guys, Crescio used to be used quite a bit, but it seems like as we continue to add more heroes to AFK Arena, we're not seeing as much utility in a multitude of game modes. Has pretty much dropped out of the Cursed Realm at this point. Some Nightmare Corridor, we still see him used in a combination, but then Treasure Scramble, he's not used either. So really kind of niching down the game mode that he is in. And then Ezio, of course, with the insta-kill, very, very niche at this point, as well as a majority of heroes in here. Even campaign formations, guys. Khazard, we're still seeing a little bit of play, but Mihira, I haven't used for quite a bit. And then, of course, you have Zafriel, you have the original version of Athalia, Tarnos, a lot of those heroes not being used. And then seeing our C tier, guys, it just continues to grow as we get more and more heroes. Even the Awakened version of Aziz literally has one spot only. And I think on this iteration, that boss is out, which was the Hound. So even with that iteration, I don't think it is in there. And then, of course, we have our bottom Walker tier down here. Walker, unfortunately, is joined by a bunch of his friends. And unfortunately, even looking down here, guys, Vika. So Vika was in, I believe Vika was in the C tier is where she fell. So Vika, and I'm not sure if I didn't, maybe, no, I might not have put her picture in here. But Vika is actually right into this bottom C tier, guys, is where we're actually seeing the hero right now. So this is, again, utility-wise, and I thought I'd put her in here. But overall, guys, we're seeing the C tier without Vika. Essentially, Vika is not being used very much. But looking up here, and I was just thinking, guys, the SS tier, we don't have Gavis in there either. All right, guys, sorry about that. So yeah, putting Vika, guys, Vika is actually right here in the C tier, as you see right there. And then Gavis and Eugene are both coming in preliminary right here in the SS tier. Now, the reason being, Gavis we're actually seeing in a lot of the treasure scramble, but we've also been seeing a lot of other utility with him, even coming into some formations within the Nightmare Corridor now. And I think overall, the Cursed Realm is probably going to be the next one that's coming in. And then, of course, Eugene is very, very early. Honestly, the testing and having him and the ability to get copies. But overall, very early testing, even looking at a couple different game modes. He's doing incredibly well, even just being at that mythic level where people can build him right now, doing a considerable amount of damage. And even some players over on the test server are running him at a mythic level, which again is working kind of pretty well within there, guys. So I apologize that I did forget them in there at the very beginning. I know I put them in there, and then when I went to the view, I think it might have knocked them out of there. So again, I do apologize that I'll put some notes in there about them being a little bit earlier in there. But guys, that's going to do it for today's video. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. And as always, thank you guys for watching.